Hello, and welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, Jewel, but maybe you should call me Glinda. So, my pretty, are you a good witch or a bad witch? If this is your first time here, I would like to invite you to go back and watch my first introductory videos. There are two of them, and they will help you understand that if you proceed from here, you will be leaving Kansas behind as you discover lands you never knew existed. These lands will take you past people, place, and things that will challenge your notions of reality. To stay true to the journey, listen to these episodes in order. I'll introduce vocabulary that will become more important as time goes on, and they sort of build on each other. There is a lot to cover, and the road will be difficult at times as we meander through science, spirituality, and metaphysics to get you home with a new perspective. I aim to find balance in the extremes, so as you watch, take note of resistance you're feeling inside as it arises. I'm not asking you to ignore it. I'm asking you to dig into it and use it as a mechanism for self-discovery. You may not agree with my conclusions, and that's very okay. I'm just showing you what worked for me. Don't let my lofty goals intimidate those of you new to the voyage inward. My aim is to make art by creating a platform that takes baby steps in introducing you to the physio, psycho, mytho, mystico, creative, and spiritual paths that now all seem to be pointing in the same awesome direction, thanks to quantum physics discoveries in the past few years. So, rev up the soles of those ruby slippers and be ready for some mind-melting intrigue. But watch your step, because the path can be rough and a fall is gonna hurt. Please take a moment to subscribe to our channel here to stay up to date on new episode releases. And please like each episode to help us in our quest for algorithmic dominance. And last but not least, please join our Patreon at iArtHouse. That's patreon.com/IARTHAUS. It's the name of our umbrella project, the place for connecting on all of our creative endeavors, including Yellow Brick Road Rash. We do visual art, music, photography. Patreon is the lifeblood of this channel, though, and the only way we acquire the resources necessary to create new content. But this is also where we will turn to find potential guests for our show. Members will be able to access an interview pool in which we will source individuals who are wanting to riff with us on upcoming topics on the air. So stay tuned for more details. Let's return to Oz. So have you ever felt lonely, misunderstood, and or unseen? Have you ever looked at your life and felt fear-stricken that you need to make changes to be happy, but were even more terrified of making those changes? Perhaps you came to terms with the need to change, but had no idea which way to turn to find a place that would again feel like home. Well, it's my aim here to introduce new ways to explore and see the world that will help you redefine yourself and find a renewed sense of being that doesn't include completely casting away the life you've carved out for yourself up until this point. I mean, Dorothy thought she needed to run away, but actually, it was an inward turn she needed. So your first challenge on the road to knowing is to explore the unfamiliar. Be prepared for your new adventure by being open to new ways to see the miraculous universe in which we live. Be a dreamer. Be Dorothy. Life is about experiencing, and you can't do this from your armchair. This is something I will talk about over and over. If something you come across on this journey piques your curiosity, lean into it. If it isn't for you, then move on. Many times in my life, I've been shamed for willingly traversing uncertain paths. I choose to spend my time exploring as many diverse experiences as I absolutely can. I can't say that approach was fiscally beneficial, but I can say my life has been enriched because of it. In fact, I believe that God or Source wants us to live by experiencing this marvelous world. So I would like for you to use the technique of bracketing to help you put your learned judgments aside and just be open to new experiences, new information here that just may help you reshape your world into something real and meaningful. So what is bracketing? Bracketing is the setting aside of one's own beliefs in order to understand a subject's intended meaning. So we're going to start with, what is other? Why do we as humans have to compartmentalize everything into familiar versus unfamiliar? I'm no expert, but my gut tells me that this is inherent in our DNA, and it is an artifact left over from the days when prehistoric humans lived in a state of constant survival mode. Fear of other meant fear of predatory animals, fear of tribal attacks by intruders, fear of eating a toxic plant. Not that we don't need to maintain a healthy level of discernment about our safety, but it's clear to me that many of us still live in that brainstem activated state of fear. In addition, it is also our nature to fall into patterns of behavior, some of which are good for us and some are not. There seems to be a leaning towards routine. I suppose it's the easy way to go about life, since once you get muscle memory around something like a job or family life, it becomes easier to manage your time. But consider for a moment that you are maybe missing out on options and opportunities if you don't at least acknowledge the pattern you're in and decide if it's healthy for you or not. I just really think most of us go through life never giving that a second thought. I know for myself, as adventurous as I am, in my elder years, I can feel myself getting too comfortable in my routine. Things I don't do regularly become a little foreign to me, and then I question whether I'm actually capable. Let's take flying in a plane, for instance. I used to fly a lot, not so much these days. Now when I go to fly, I have a nervousness that catches me completely off guard, only because it isn't familiar anymore. I suppose one reason we seek pattern behavior is so that we don't have to feel nervous about something new, nervous about perhaps failure. But what if that feeling is benign and unnecessary and is just keeping you from joy? Let's move on to Dorothy and the subject of other in regards to the movie. In the beginning, Dorothy's angst about her lot in life forces her to dream about running away to faraway lands. She craves adventure and the allure to other, to find a place where she can feel a sense of belonging, somewhere where she can be appreciated, somewhere maybe over the rainbow. The song was her cry for adventure in an otherwise mundane, linear, black and white world that was quite literally emphasized by MGM with monochrome footage. That's where she felt alone, undervalued, and misunderstood. The song illustrated her readiness for the growth and expansion inherent in moving forward down a strange, new, experiential path. In essence, her soil was tilled, the ground roughed up, and ready for the planting of new seeds. Let's turn for a moment to the tarot. I can hardly talk about Dorothy's journey without mentioning the Fool card, which is card 0 in the deck. It represents beginnings and taking that foolish step into the proverbial unknown without a plan. But I think this card represents pure potential. That first step down the Yellow Brick Road is Dorothy's first step towards seeing the world as an awakened human being, as a hero. But with her journey came vulnerability to other, which in her open state of awareness really didn't seem to be a problem for her, as we saw when she landed in Oz, relatively unfazed by the unfamiliar world she'd landed in. However, I have to add here that, like the Fool in the card, Dorothy was accompanied by her trusted companion, Toto. In my mind, both the dog in the card and Toto represent basic instincts. So let's go back to the discussion of other in relation to survival mechanisms and dig in on that for a minute.
If the dog symbol represents instincts important to survival, then where do we stand on needing to raise our awareness around other and our response to it? The way I see it, before her journey in Oz, Toto and Dorothy were both operating on a purely instinctive level, sharing their frustration about how they were each being treated by others in the story. Toto by Miss Gulch, and Dorothy, of course, by her Aunt Em. However, once in Oz, we can see that Dorothy had already moved out of that instinctive mindset and is willing to open herself up to the journey that she's been thrust into. But she brings Toto, or instinct, along with her as a reminder to not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Well, she relies on him. She loves Toto. She loves that part of herself. Throughout the movie, Toto is there to warn her of the true and perceived dangers she's approaching. But she has to learn to listen when it's necessary, and she has. She quiets him when she feels deep down she is actually safe. We could all take a lesson here and be aware of our own awareness in challenging moments when we feel anxious. Anxiety is a sign of the fight or flight mechanism. Without going too far down another rabbit hole, I have to say anxiety causes persistent low-level inflammation that wreaks havoc on our bodies over the long run. So, learning to discern what is truly a threat to our safety and what is a perceived threat is a feature of awakening to our full potential that will also lead to healing our bodies. I will include these links in the show notes, but two people influential to me in regards to the power we have over our bodies, if we just allow it, are Dr. Bruce Lipton, author of Biology of Belief, and Dr. Joe Dispenza, author of Becoming Supernatural. Both of these books have incredible reviews. I highly recommend them. And I can say that they both made a huge impression on me. I won't deep dive, like I said, on these now, but we will be covering them in the future episodes. Please go ahead and binge on their YouTube videos and support them by buying their books. It's pretty amazing stuff, and like I think I said, their links will be in the show notes. Now, I would like everyone to take a moment and get into a comfortable position, close your eyes, and take a long, deep breath. Hold it, and then exhale slowly. Do this 3 times while you imagine you are laying out under a carpet of stars on an otherwise dark night. Where can we plant our own feet in this modern world and gaze upon such mysterious wonder that we feel driven to lose ourselves to it? Where is our over the rainbow? Well, the skies above hold many secrets that may never be revealed. But oh, what Oz we can bemuse as we contemplate the endless possibilities that could exist in an infinite universe. So, in a moment, we are going to leave the allegory behind and take a hard left into the topic of non-human intelligences. It is everywhere in the media now, and I'm afraid it's a crucial part of this Dorothy story. Surprised? Don't be. We can't talk about knowing who we are without trying to figure out who they are. Dorothy explored the land of Oz by joining with the strange and unfamiliar characters she met along the way. Her fearlessness, but also her craving for adventure, helped her open herself up to creating community with others in order to solve a common goal, a common challenge. Opening up to other in a world where we have become very embedded in our own recurring patterns is quite literally our first task on this journey. Lean into this to take the next step down the road to knowledge. So, to begin, I have a confession to make. I love Ancient Aliens. There, I said it. But bear with me here as I explain. My husband and I were turned on to it by a friend that was so all about it that we decided to watch, not really knowing what we were getting into. I've always been a sci-fi geek, so I thought it was going to be something like that, but no. I'm sure by now everyone knows what it's about, so I won't go into it. If you don't know, feel free to start the series. But 3 episodes in, we were hooked. It was more of a junkie TV sort of hooked at the time, but we kept watching and observing and thinking, and a few short episodes later, we were following along, feeling like we had just stumbled onto the search for the Holy Grail. But not maybe in the way you think. Sure, it was thought-provoking and so fun making fun of the stars of the show for their quirkiness, but for me, it triggered a memory that ended up being a fairly profound nugget in my journey. Maybe it was my oil can, so I could get all greased up to feel my heart. I don't know. But once the memory came up, I felt like it was my mission to be in discovery mode, to be open to what I was hearing and all the while use my own critical thinking to remain balanced in my analysis of it. And here I remain. I have to add that for better or worse, Ancient Aliens put the alien discussion back into the cultural milieu and created space for not only the thought exercise, but for people who had been closeted experiencers their entire lives. Being able to talk about what were undoubtedly very scary, discombobulating events for these individuals is creating a healing space and a place for open inquiry into the phenomenon. And it was my first intentional step down the Yellow Brick Road. Okay, so here's my story. In about 1967, at the age of 5, I had a paranormal experience. My parents had remodeled their small 1950s home so that I could have my own bedroom going into kindergarten. It was on the end of the house away from the other 2 bedrooms, but just adjacent to the guest bathroom so I could have my own suite. I felt so special. But for some reason, 2 nightmares, dreams, or whatever, have stuck with me to this day and somehow seem tied together. The first one was perhaps a lucid dream. I just don't even know. In my memory, I hadn't been asleep long when I woke to the shadow of a very tall, ominous cowboy on my bathroom door. I slept with the bathroom light on, which would have cast light, but the shadow was on the wrong side of the door. It was as if the light was coming from a point behind me, from a point in my bedroom, and casting shadow of the entity on the door. It wasn't long after that I had my second and last nightmare in that room. I had an intense experience in which I was an NHI abductee. Before I go on, let me set the scene for you in 1967. We lived near downtown Houston. It was a small home in a well-regarded neighborhood. My mom stayed home with me and my brother, and my dad worked for his family's business. It was a simple but nice life, with the only drama I can really remember being fighting with my little brother. My parents were strict, and our exposure to TV and the outside world was very limited by today's standards. But also, technology wasn't what it is today. We may not have even had color TV yet. I recall being forced to play outside most of the day, with inside time being about reading and coloring. In regards to outer space, I had only 2 real knowns: NASA with their journey to the moon, and Lost in Space. Or so I thought. There were only 2. More on that later. I wouldn't consider either of these to be particularly triggering for an alien abduction dream by a 5-year-old, but I wanted to bring it up to be transparent. The next thing I know, as far as I can remember, I suddenly realized I was in a space that I can only now refer to as a spacecraft. I was alone and afraid in a spacious, bright room. I turned around to see some kind of conveyor belt traversing the outer wall of the room, and once I focused in on the moving belt, I could see that my brother, mother, and father were all dismembered on that belt, lifeless, but not like they were dead, but rather as if they were robots who'd been taken apart. Next, I became aware that there were other beings in the room. They were small. That's really all I can recall about them. I guess they could have been grays. Suddenly, my mother's head, sitting up on her neck, said, "Everything's going to be okay. over and over again. I woke up to her holding me and saying those very words. In that moment of screaming, I was both inside and outside the dream. Or was it a dream? Before I reconnected with the notion of NHI, when watching Ancient Aliens, I would have said so. I went for literally decades without telling another soul that story. I hadn't told my mother until recently, mainly to see her reaction. But she was unmoved, and I've always wondered why. I'm not sure she remembers the event. Turned off already? Don't be. Remember, to know who we are, we need to have explored who we are not and who they are. What would the Wizard of Oz story be without Dorothy accepting the idea that the speaking scarecrow actually could exist in that unfamiliar world? And as you will see, our reality will be revealed to be equally as unfamiliar if you follow me down this path. So stay tuned. Still not willing to play along? Fine, Miss Gulch. Just watch out for that twister. At the very least, my dream was just a dream ripe for dream work analysis. But at age 5? Age 5 does seem to be a very liminal age. I have been reading these days about children at a very young age verbalizing to their parents that they had lived a prior life. I have my own experience around this that drives me to believe the phenomenon is real. When my son was 5, he literally turned to me in the car and told me he had lived a life before this one. I was a young parent, and the idea of that was terrifying to me. But I asked him if he could remember anything, and he said no. So, of course, I dropped it, scared of the implications and not mature enough to be able to handle whatever might have come of it. There have been some incredible recent studies done about this, so we might chase that down also in a future video. I know I said I wasn't going to go down this rabbit hole, but you may want to check out a book called A Theory of Everything by Ken Wilber. He deep dives into integral theory, and it includes topics central to child development. I will be covering it in a future episode, but it is a heavy read, so you may want to get started. The point to all of this is to show you that a perceived alien experience, whether true or not, throws the participant into ontological shock. So what is ontological shock? It generally refers to a deep and unsettling feeling of cognitive dissonance or realization when one's fundamental understanding of reality, existence, or the nature of being is disrupted or challenged. It is the profound disorientation that occurs when one encounters a concept, experience, or idea that fundamentally contradicts their established beliefs, assumptions, or worldview. Ontological shock often leads to a period of reflection, reevaluation, and potentially a shift in one's fundamental understanding or perspective on life and existence. That person is forced to reckon with the struggle between their new perceived reality, their past reality, and the perceived reality of the collective conscious. The inward turn often begins here. One becomes discombobulated with their current way of seeing the world, and so an upheaval arises that forces them to acknowledge there may just be a reality outside of the one they had perceived their entire life, whether that be a paranormal experience, a psychedelic experience, or just an unexpected shift in your own established paradigm. It makes for a difficult time that has to be dealt with. The Yellow Brick Road Rash. I have a footnote to add to my experience that I only recently began to entertain, and it's about that dang scary green floating wizard head. What does that head look like to you now as an adult here in 2024? I will wait. A green-gray alien, perhaps? So, lo-fi aside, you have to admit that there is a resemblance. Now stay with me here. Millions of young children have seen the movie. It came out in 1939. The Roswell incident occurred in 1947, just a few years later. It aired on TV in 1956. Once playing on TV sets around the country, it became a household name, I'm pretty sure. With that scary big green floating head popping into many a child's dreamtime musings. All innocent up in here, just a good story, my parents said. But could that big head have become embedded in every child's subconscious from that point on, only to resurface as what we perceive to be current day grays? We will likely never know, but it sure is an interesting thing to think about. I mean, look at that head. What was MGM thinking? The paranormal is a peculiar sidebar in the consciousness discussion. I mean, pop culture aside, we can all agree that even the possibility of their existence opens up doors to conversations about defining reality. Who are we and why are we or they here? Nonetheless, the subject has to be considered, even if what we learn makes us uncomfortable. Personally, although I question the legitimacy of my experience as being anything other than a child's nightmare, it begs the question, what are the other possible implications, and in what space is there room for allowing them as fact? Experiences with NHI have been happening for thousands of years. Ancient art is rife with examples. I mean, have you seen this? But did my abduction nightmare experience predispose me to being inquisitive and open-minded about going where no man has gone before? Did having that happen make me more sensitive to other? I think maybe. Did it allow me to have an unbiased view that just allowed me to be open to the experience of it? Maybe. But did the green head have an effect on my dream life? Also maybe. I don't have any answers, but at the very least, I think it could be pointing to how vulnerable young children are to what media they are exposed to, before the age of 7 especially. Before I forget, I will be mentioning this periodically, but I'm looking for someone who can hook me up with dinner with Dr. Donald Hoffman. My husband and I had a life-changing experience reading his book. We just want to meet him. And no cheating, Grasshopper. Do not read ahead. It's face-melting information. Read at your own risk. If you're interested in going deeper with the podcast, I will be looking for listeners who have had their own paranormal experiences, including those with NHI, and are willing to share here. Why am I doing this? I think it's important to try to normalize the discussion so we can all feel more comfortable with it. I think there are more people out there that have had these questionable experiences and are left feeling confused and alienated. Although only a part of this podcast, it is an important one. I'm not trying to define it for anyone, just merely allowing a safe space for exploring these events and then building a community open to other. If you have had really any type of paranormal experience you would be open to sharing, please join our interview pool at our Patreon account as a member. We are taking interview requests from our membership holders. You will find the link below. I look forward to melding with you on the next edition of Yellow Brick Road Rash. Thanks for being here. Nanu Nanu.